Aunt Lorraine has no will. First to the lawyer wins. The words sliced through the birthday dinner chatter like a knife. My nephew Marcus threw his head back, laughing at his own joke. And within seconds, the entire table erupted. My sister Beverly's high-pitched cackle. My other nephew, Tyler's snorting. Even my brother-in-law, Jim, who usually stayed quiet, was grinning into his wine glass. Everyone was laughing, everyone except me. I sat at the head of my own dining room table, 72 candles worth of wax cooling on the cake nobody had cut yet, and watched my family laugh about my death, about racing to claim my things before my body was even cold. "Oh, Marcus, stop it," my sister finally managed between giggles, dabbing at her eyes with her napkin, but she was still smiling. They all were. I looked around that table at the people I'd loved my entire life. The sister I'd helped raise after our parents died, the nephews I babysat, bought school supplies for, helped with college funds, the extended family I'd hosted every Thanksgiving, every Christmas, every birthday for the past 40 years. Sat. And in that moment, I finally saw the truth I'd been refusing to see for months. I wasn't Aunt Lorraine to them anymore. I was a walking inheritance, a countdown clock, a prize to be claimed. "Hey, I'm just saying what we're all thinking," Marcus continued, reaching for another piece of bread. "Aunt Lorraine's sitting on prime real estate here in Portland, and she's not getting any younger. Someone's got to bring it up eventually." "Marcus!" Beverly tried to sound scandalized, but her eyes flicked to Jim. I caught it. That look. The one that said Marcus had just voiced what they'd already discussed in private. My hands were shaking in my lap. I pressed them flat against my thighs, kept my face neutral. I'd learned that trick over the years, how to hide what you're really feeling, how to smile when you're breaking inside. "Well," I said quietly, and the table fell silent. They all looked at me, some still grinning, waiting for me to laugh along, to show I was a good sport. "That's certainly an interesting perspective, Marcus." "Hello, everyone. My name is Lorraine Mitchell, and before I tell you what happened next, I need to know something. Where are you watching this from? Are you in your living room like I am right now, in bed maybe, on your phone? Drop your city or state in the comments. I'd love to know I'm not alone in this, because what I'm about to tell you is the story of how that single joke, that moment of cruelty disguised as humor, changed everything. How it opened my eyes to a truth I'd been avoiding, and how, 1 week later, I sat in my attorney's office and made a decision that would turn my family's world upside down. But I'm getting ahead of myself. To understand why that joke hurt so much, you need to understand who these people were to me, and more importantly, who I'd been to them. So let me take you back 6 months before that birthday dinner to when I first started noticing things weren't quite right. 6 months before that birthday dinner, I was at the grocery store when my phone rang. Beverly, my younger sister, and the only family I had left after losing my husband Robert 15 years earlier. "Lorraine, I was just thinking about you," she said, her voice bright with that particular cheerfulness that, looking back, should have been my first warning sign. "That's nice, Bev. What's up?" "Oh, nothing really. I was just wondering, have you thought about updating your paperwork lately? You know, medical directives, that sort of thing. We're not getting any younger, and with Robert gone, I just want to make sure everything's in order for you." I'd frowned, shifting my shopping basket to my other arm. "I'm 71, not 90. I think I'm managing fine." "Of course you are. I just worry, that's all. You're all alone in that big house." That big house. She said it like it was a problem, not the home Robert and I had bought 40 years ago, the place where we'd planned to grow old together, the place I'd chosen to stay after he died, because every corner held a memory I couldn't bear to leave behind. "I'm perfectly fine, Beverly." I know. "Hey, do you still have that key I gave you to my place? Because I was thinking it might be smart if I had one to yours too. You know, just in case something happened and we needed to get in quickly." My stomach had twisted then, though I couldn't have said why. "I'll think about it." Over the next few weeks, the calls increased. Not just Beverly, but Marcus too, and Tyler. Suddenly, my nephews who'd barely called once a month were checking in twice a week. "Just wanted to see how you're doing, Aunt Lorraine. Thought about you today. Wondered if you needed help with anything around the house. Hey, we should update your contacts list. Make sure you have everyone's current numbers, you know, for emergencies." I'd felt guilty for my suspicion. These were the people I'd loved and supported for decades. Marcus was 43, Tyler 38, grown men with families of their own. Beverly was 69, my baby sister who I'd practically raised after Mom and Dad died. Surely they were just being thoughtful. Surely I was being paranoid. Then I'd overheard the phone call. It was a Tuesday afternoon in March. I'd gone to Beverly's house to drop off some family photos I'd been organizing. I had a key, she'd insisted years ago, so I let myself in when she didn't answer the door. That's when I heard her voice from the kitchen, low and urgent. "I'm just saying, Jim, that house is worth at least $850,000 in this market. And she's got the pension from the school district, the life insurance payout from Robert. She's been sitting on all that money for 15 years. I'd frozen in the entryway, my hand still on the doorknob. "I know we can't count on anything," Beverly continued, "but she's 71, and she has no kids of her own. It's not like there's anyone else. We're her closest family. It should come to us. It's only right." My heart had dropped into my stomach like a stone. I'd stood there in my sister's entryway, unable to move, barely breathing, afraid that if I made a sound, she'd know I was there, know that I'd heard. "Marcus keeps pushing," Jim's voice responded, muffled but clear enough. "He wants us to talk to her about moving into one of those senior communities. Says the house is too much for her to manage alone." "That's actually not a bad idea," Beverly said. "Get her somewhere smaller. Maybe we could convince her to sell the Portland house now, help her manage the money." The words kept coming, each one a small betrayal that added up to something massive. My sister, the girl I'd helped raise after our parents died when she was only 12, was discussing my life, my home, my death, like it was a business transaction. I'd left quietly, setting the photos on the hall table and slipping back out. I drove home on autopilot, my hands gripping the steering wheel so tight my knuckles went white. That night, I couldn't sleep. I kept replaying Beverly's words. She's 71, said like I had one foot in the grave already. She has no kids of her own, said like my childlessness made me less valuable. Like my life had been meaningless because Robert and I couldn't have babies. We'd tried. God knows we'd tried. 5 years of doctors, treatments, hope, and heartbreak. We'd made peace with it eventually, poured our love into each other, into our students. I'd taught 3rd grade for 36 years, into Beverly's kids when they came along. I'd thought that love was mutual. I'd thought I mattered to them beyond what I could provide. Over the next 3 months, I watched. Really watched. And once you start seeing, you can't unsee. Marcus, calling to ask about my estate planning and if I'd thought about the future. Tyler dropping by with his wife, Rachel, casually mentioning how much houses in my neighborhood were selling for, how overwhelming it must be to maintain such a large property alone. Beverly suggesting I add her name to my bank accounts, just to make things easier if something happened. The final straw before the birthday dinner came in late May. I'd gone to my doctor for my annual physical. Routine checkup, nothing serious. But somehow, Beverly knew about it before I even got home. "I heard you had a doctor's appointment," she said when she called that evening. "Is everything okay? Should we be worried?" "How did you know about that?" I'd asked, genuinely confused. A pause, just a beat too long. "Oh, you must have mentioned it." But I hadn't. I never had. Which meant either she was monitoring my calls, or she'd been in contact with my doctor's office, or the paranoia wasn't paranoia anymore. It was reality. And then came June 15th, my 72nd birthday. The dinner I'd been looking forward to because, despite everything, I'd still hoped I was wrong. Still hoped that family meant something more than dollar signs and real estate assessments. Marcus's joke shattered that hope into 1,000 pieces. First to the lawyer wins. As I lay in bed that night, unable to sleep for the second time in 3 months, I made a decision. The next morning, I called my attorney. David Morrison had handled Robert's estate 15 years ago, and he'd been our family lawyer for nearly 30 years before that. He was 75 now, semi-retired, but he'd always told me to call if I needed anything. "Lorraine," he said warmly when his secretary put me through. "It's been a while. How are you? I need to make some changes to my will, David. Can you fit me in this week?" If he was surprised by my urgency, he didn't show it. Of course. How about Wednesday at 2? I spent the next 3 days thinking, really thinking, about what I wanted my legacy to be, about who deserved to benefit from the life Robert and I had built together. Beverly had her own home, paid off with Jim's teacher pension and her own retirement. Marcus worked in tech, pulling in 6 figures. Tyler owned a successful landscaping business. None of them needed my money. They wanted it, but they didn't need it. And more importantly, they hadn't earned it. Not with love, not with care, with calculation maybe, with greed certainly, but not with the kind of devotion that makes you deserving of someone's life savings. On Monday, I volunteered at the Happy Tails Animal Rescue. Like I did every week, I'd been going there for 8 years. Ever since I'd adopted my dog Cooper after Robert died, the shelter had saved me during my darkest time, given me a reason to get up in the morning, connected me with people who cared about something beyond themselves. I watched Sarah, the shelter director, cradle a sick puppy that had been found abandoned on the highway. Watched volunteers spending their Saturday cleaning kennels and socializing traumatized dogs. Watched an elderly cat named Jasper finally get adopted after 3 years in the shelter. These people poured their hearts into saving lives. Not for profit, the shelter barely scraped by on donations. Not for recognition, most of them were anonymous volunteers, but because they believed every life mattered, every creature deserved dignity and love. That's when I knew. Wednesday afternoon, I sat across from David in his office, the same office where Robert and I had signed our first wills decades ago. I want to change everything, I told him. The house, the savings, the life insurance, the investment accounts, all of it goes to Happy Tails Animal Rescue, not a penny to my family. David set down his pen slowly. Lorraine, that's certainly your right. But I have to ask, are you sure? This is a significant estate. We're talking about close to $1.2 million, including the property value. Your family is going to be surprised. My family, I said, and my voice came out harder than I'd intended, spent my 72nd birthday joking about racing to claim my belongings after I die. My sister has been plotting how to manage my money. My nephews have been circling like vultures. So yes, David, I'm absolutely sure. He studied me for a long moment, then nodded. All right, let's make this ironclad. If we're doing this, we're doing it right. No loopholes, no room for contest. We spent 3 hours going over every detail, every contingency, every possible way my family might try to fight it. David was thorough. It was why Robert and I had trusted him for so long. He didn't just change my will, he restructured everything to make sure my wishes would be honored. We'll need a new medical directive, he said, making notes. And I'm recommending a living trust to avoid probate entirely. It'll make things cleaner, faster, and much harder to contest. Whatever it takes, I said. I also suggest we include a no contest clause. Basically, if anyone challenges the will, they forfeit any minor bequests they might have received. I'd thought about that. Give them each $1,000. Something small. So if they fight it, they lose even that. David smiled grimly. Smart. Shows you didn't forget them. You deliberately chose to leave them minimal amounts. Makes it much harder to claim undue influence or incompetence. We set up everything over the next 2 weeks. I signed papers, had witnesses, got everything notarized with meticulous care. David even suggested I get a brief evaluation from my doctor confirming my mental competency. I know it seems excessive, he said, but when estates of this size get redirected away from blood relatives, families fight dirty. We need to prove beyond any doubt that you were of sound mind when you made these decisions. So, Dr. Patricia Chen, my physician of 20 years, didn't even hesitate. Lorraine, you're one of the sharpest people I know. I'll document everything. By the end of June, it was done. Everything I owned would go to Happy Tails Animal Rescue. The house, the accounts, the life insurance policy that had sat untouched since Robert's death. All of it. I told Sarah, the shelter director, over coffee one morning in early July. You're doing what? She nearly dropped her cup. When I die, everything goes to the rescue. David's already drawn up the papers. It's done. Lorraine, I don't know what to say. That's incredibly generous, but what about your family? I'd smiled then, a bitter smile that probably didn't reach my eyes. My family has made it very clear what they think of me. They see an inheritance, not an aunt, a paycheck, not a person. The rescue gave me Cooper, gave me community, gave me purpose when I had nothing left. You've earned this. They haven't. Sarah's eyes filled with tears. Do you know what this means? We could finally buy the property instead of renting, expand the facilities, hire full-time vet staff, save so many more animals. That's exactly what I want, I said. Something good coming from my life, not just greed and fighting and resentment. We hugged in that coffee shop. 2 women who understood that family isn't always blood. and love isn't always where you expect it. The hardest part was waiting, going to family dinners and pretending nothing had changed, listening to Marcus make comments about future inheritance taxes, and Beverly hint about making sure your affairs are in order. If you're still watching this, I need you to do something for me. Hit that subscribe button right now, because what happens next, the way this all unfolded, you're not going to want to miss a second of it. I promise you, the ending is worth it. I kept the secret for 6 months. Those 6 months were the strangest of my life. I walked through family gatherings like an actress playing a role, knowing something none of them knew. Every fake smile, every calculating comment, every time they mentioned the house or your assets, I held my tongue. Thanksgiving was particularly difficult. Beverly hosted, and I brought my famous sweet potato casserole like I had for 40 years. Marcus and Tyler were both there with their families, and the conversation inevitably turned to estate planning. You know, Aunt Lorraine, Marcus said, loading his plate with turkey. My financial advisor says everyone over 70 should really have their paperwork updated every 2 years. Technology changes. Tax laws change. You need to stay current. That's thoughtful of you to worry about, I said mildly, passing the cranberry sauce. He's right, Lorraine, Beverly chimed in. Remember the Hendersons? When Margaret died, it took them 2 years to settle everything because nothing was organized. We just want to make sure you're protected. Protected. That was their new word, as if their concern was for me, not for ensuring they could access my assets quickly when I was gone. I'd looked around that table, at my sister, my nephews, their wives, their children, and felt nothing but sadness. Not anger anymore, just a deep, hollow grief for what we could have been and weren't. Christmas was worse. Beverly gave me a leather portfolio for important documents. Marcus gave me a book on organizing your legacy. Tyler gave me a gift certificate to a senior living community for a tour and consultation. I thanked them all graciously, brought the gifts home, and donated them to Goodwill the next day. January came, then February. I continued my routine, volunteering at Happy Tales twice a week, having lunch with my friend Dorothy, who'd taught with me for 20 years, tending my garden, living my life. But I was tired. Not sick, just tired in the way people get when they've lived a long life and suddenly realize they're ready for it to be over. Robert had been gone 15 years. My teaching days were a decade behind me. I had friends. My volunteer work. Cooper curled at my feet each night. It was a good life, but it was a quiet one. And increasingly, I was okay with the idea of it ending. I didn't tell anyone about the chest pains that started in March. Brief ones, nothing dramatic, just occasional squeezes that made me pause, breathe, wait for them to pass. I didn't tell anyone when I went back to Dr. Chen and she ordered tests, her face concerned. And I didn't tell anyone when she sat me down in her office on a Tuesday in April and said the words I'd somehow been expecting. Lorraine, I need to refer you to a cardiologist. What we're seeing on your tests is concerning. It's manageable, treatable, but it's serious. Your heart is showing significant weakness. How serious, I'd asked. With treatment, you could have years. Without it, she'd paused. I need you to take this seriously. I'd nodded, scheduled the cardiology appointment, and driven home thinking about timing, about justice, about how sometimes the universe has a darkly perfect sense of irony. I decided not to pursue aggressive treatment. I know what you're thinking, that I gave up, that I was being dramatic, that I let my family's betrayal push me toward death. But that's not how it was. I was 72 years old. I'd lived a full life, loved deeply, made a difference in the lives of hundreds of students over 36 years. I'd been married to my soulmate for 43 years before cancer took him. I'd traveled, learned, laughed, and survived profound grief. I wasn't giving up. I was choosing. The cardiologist, Dr. Ramirez, presented options: surgery with a 60% success rate, medications that would buy me time but diminish my quality of life, lifestyle changes that might add years but would restrict everything I enjoyed. Or, I'd said, interrupting his careful explanation, I could live the next few months exactly as I want to, fully, without fear or machines or surgeries. That's also an option, he'd admitted quietly. You'd likely have 6 months, maybe a year. The decline would be gradual, then relatively quick at the end. Then that's what I choose. I didn't tell Beverly or the nephews. Why would I? So they could hover with false concern while calculating how soon they could sell my house. So they could rush the timeline they'd already been planning? No, this was mine. My choice, my timeline, my ending. I told David, my attorney. He needed to know. Lorraine, he'd said, his voice heavy. I'm so sorry. Don't be. I'm at peace with this. But I need you to promise me something. When I'm gone, I want you to personally deliver the will copies. Not by mail, in person. I want you to see their faces. He'd smiled despite himself. You're a little bit vindictive, you know that? I've earned it. I told Sarah at the animal rescue. She'd cried, held my hands, asked if there was anything she could do. Just promise me you'll use the money wisely. Save as many as you can. That's all I want. I told Dorothy over lunch at our favorite cafe. She'd known me too long to offer platitudes. Does your family know? No. Good. Let them find out the hard way. Those final months were, in many ways, the freest of my life. I stopped pretending. When Marcus called to discuss future planning, I told him I was busy. When Beverly dropped by unexpectedly, I didn't invite her in. When Tyler suggested again that I tour senior communities, I said I was perfectly happy where I was. I spent my days with Cooper, in my garden, volunteering with people who valued me for who I was rather than what I owned. I watched the sunrise from my porch swing, the same swing where Robert and I had spent countless evenings. I reread all my favorite books. I made peace with my life. And I waited. The end came in late August, faster than even Dr. Ramirez had predicted. A major cardiac event at home on a Wednesday evening. Cooper was the one who found me, barking frantically at the neighbor, Mrs. Patterson, who called 911. I was unconscious when they arrived. I never woke up. I died at Portland General Hospital at 3:47 a.m. on Thursday, August 22nd, with Cooper waiting faithfully at home and none of my blood relatives by my bedside. They were all too busy sleeping, I suppose. Beverly got the call at 6:30 a.m. from the hospital. I'd listed her as my emergency contact years ago and had never bothered to change it, though, in hindsight, maybe I should have listed Sarah or Dorothy instead. According to Dorothy, who heard this from Beverly's neighbor, my sister's first call after hanging up with the hospital wasn't to Marcus or Tyler to share the sad news about their aunt. It was to a real estate agent. She'd pulled herself together by the time she called the family, of course. Put on the grieving sister act. Marcus and Tyler came over, solemn and appropriate, talking about funeral arrangements and calling relatives. But Dorothy, who'd stopped by Beverly's house to offer condolences, overheard Marcus in the kitchen. We should wait a decent interval, maybe 2 weeks, then list the house. Market's hot right now. There was no interval, no waiting. 3 days after my death, they were already cleaning out my house, or trying to. Mrs. Patterson, my neighbor, called David when she saw them hauling boxes out to a truck. David arrived within 20 minutes, his usually calm demeanor replaced with barely controlled anger. "Stop," he'd said, standing in my driveway, blocking their path. "All of you, stop right now." Beverly had turned, confused. "David, what are you doing here? I'm Lorraine's attorney, and you're currently removing property from an estate that's in probate. I need you to put everything back immediately. We're just clearing out some clothes, some personal items," Marcus said, defensive. "Nothing valuable. I don't care if you're removing trash bags. Nothing leaves this property until the will is read. That's the law." Tyler had stepped forward, trying to smooth things over. "Look, we understand protocol, but we're family. Aunt Lorraine would want us to handle things." "Would she?" David's voice had gone cold. "Interesting assumption. I'll be in touch about the will reading. Until then, this house is sealed. I'll have the locks changed today." According to Mrs. Patterson, who watched from her window, Beverly's face had gone white. "Sealed? David, that seems extreme. We're her only family. We'll discuss everything at the will reading," David interrupted. "I'll contact each of you with a date and time. Don't come back to this property." He'd called me afterward, a tradition we'd joked about in his office. "I'm supposed to call when something significant happens so you can watch from wherever you are," he'd said. "Well, Lorraine, I just stopped them from ransacking your house. You should have seen Beverly's face." The will reading was scheduled for September 5th, 2 weeks after my death. David arranged it in his office conference room and required attendance from all beneficiaries, which meant Beverly, Marcus, and Tyler each received certified letters requiring their presence. "It's really unusual that the lawyer won't just tell us over the phone," Beverly told Dorothy. "Makes me nervous." "Good, I thought from wherever I was. You should be nervous." September 5th arrived on a Thursday, bright and clear. David arranged the conference room carefully. 3 chairs on one side of the table for my family, himself at the head, and Sarah from Happy Tales seated on the other side. The confusion when Beverly, Marcus, and Tyler walked in and saw Sarah was apparently priceless. "Why is she here?" Marcus had asked. David's smile was thin. "Let's begin." David had set up his laptop to record the proceeding. "For the record," he'd explained, though everyone there knew it was to protect against future claims of misrepresentation. Beverly sat in the center chair, Marcus and Tyler flanking her. All 3 looked puzzled by Sarah's presence, but they'd settled in with the kind of barely contained anticipation you see in people who think they're about to win something. "Thank you all for coming," David began formally. "We're here to execute the last will and testament of Lorraine Mitchell, who passed on August 22nd of this year. The will was updated and finalized on June 30th and was executed with full legal compliance, witnessed, notarized, and," he paused meaningfully, "accompanied by a statement of mental competency from Mrs. Mitchell's physician." Beverly's brow furrowed slightly at that last part, but she said nothing. "Let me begin with the personal bequests," David continued. "To Beverly Mitchell, my sister, I leave the sum of $1,000. Silence. Beverly's confused smile froze on her face. "To Marcus Henderson, my nephew, I leave the sum of $1,000. Marcus leaned forward. "I'm sorry, what?" "To Tyler Henderson, my nephew, I leave the sum of $1,000. "David," Beverly's voice was sharp now. "What is this? $1,000? Each? What about the house, the accounts? There's over $1 million. "The remainder of the estate," David continued, his voice steady and clear, "including the residential property at 2847 Maple Grove Drive, all bank accounts, investment portfolios, life insurance proceeds, and any other assets not specifically mentioned, shall be transferred in their entirety to Happy Tales Animal Rescue, a registered 501(c)(3) nonprofit organization." The room exploded. "That's impossible!" Marcus was on his feet. "She wouldn't. There's no way. This is a mistake," Beverly said, her voice rising. "David, there's obviously been a mistake. My sister would never—" "There's no mistake," David said calmly. "I have here a letter from Mrs. Mitchell, written in her own hand, which she requested I read at this time." He pulled out an envelope, my handwriting on the front. I'd written it the day after we finalized everything, sealed it, and given it to him for exactly this moment. David opened it and began to read. "To my family," he started, and the room fell silent. "If you're hearing this, I'm gone, and you've just learned that you're not inheriting what you expected. I imagine you're shocked, angry. Perhaps you're already thinking about lawyers and ways to contest this will." Beverly's face had gone from white to red. "Let me save you the trouble and explain. For the last year of my life, I watched you circle me like vultures. I heard the phone calls about my assets. I heard the jokes about racing to the lawyer. I saw how your visits increased in frequency but decreased in warmth. You didn't see a person anymore. You saw a bank account with a beating heart." "This is ridiculous," Marcus spat. "We loved her." David held up his hand. "Let me finish." He continued reading. "I gave you chances, so many chances to prove me wrong. But Marcus's joke at my birthday dinner was the final confirmation of what I already knew. You don't deserve the life Robert and I built together." David's voice remained steady as he continued reading my letter. "Happy Tales gave me purpose, community, and love during my darkest time. They never asked me for anything. They never calculated my worth. They cared about me because they're good people who dedicate themselves to helping the helpless. That's where my legacy belongs. Not with people who counted my days for profit, but with people who count lives worth saving. I've left each of you $1,000. Not because you deserve it, but to prove I didn't forget you. I deliberately chose this. My mind was sound, my decision final. There is a no contest clause. If you fight this will, you forfeit even that small amount. I hope someday you'll understand that family is more than blood and obligation. It's about how you treat people when there's nothing to gain from it. Goodbye, Beverly, Marcus, Tyler. I loved you all once. I wish you'd given me a reason to keep loving you. Lorraine." The silence after David finished was absolute. Beverly's face was in her hands. Marcus stared at the table like he could burn holes through it with his eyes. Tyler looked genuinely stricken. Maybe he'd convinced himself they'd been subtle, that I hadn't noticed. Sarah's eyes were filled with tears, but she sat quietly, dignified, letting the moment settle. "This is fraud," Beverly finally said, her voice breaking. "She was manipulated. That woman," she pointed at Sarah, "she clearly took advantage." Mrs. Mitchell was evaluated by her physician 2 weeks after drafting this will, David interrupted. Dr. Patricia Chen documented her mental acuity, her clear understanding of her assets and decisions, and her explicit wishes. "I have that documentation, along with my own contemporaneous notes from our meetings. Mrs. Mitchell was absolutely sound of mind." "We'll contest it anyway," Marcus said. "We have rights." "Read the will again," David said. "The no contest clause means if you challenge this and lose, which you will, you forfeit your $1,000. You'll get nothing. Is your pride worth nothing?" They left separately. Beverly first, walking out stiff-backed and silent. Marcus and Tyler lingered, maybe hoping David would offer some loophole, some way to undo what I'd done. But there was nothing. I'd made sure of that. After they'd gone, David turned to Sarah. "The estate will take about 60 days to settle fully, but Happy Tales should receive the first disbursement within a month." Sarah had wiped her eyes. "She changed so many lives. She's still changing lives even now. Happy Tales used my estate exactly as I'd hoped. They purchased their building, expanded their facilities, hired 3 full-time staff members, and established a medical fund for emergency animal care. They named the new wing after me, the Lorraine Mitchell Memorial Shelter. My family?" I heard through Dorothy that Beverly stopped speaking to Marcus for months, blaming him for the birthday joke that made Lorraine crazy. Marcus and Tyler tried briefly to contest the will, but withdrew when their lawyer explained they had no case. Eventually, life went on, as it does. But in Portland, at a small animal rescue, there's a plaque by the door, in memory of Lorraine Mitchell, who taught us that love should never be taken for granted, and that family is defined by actions, not blood. That's legacy enough for me.